I've created a code window along the left-hand side, just like your matrix. I have my player rows. And so these names correspond to the names in the timeline here underneath this window. And then along the top, we have a bunch of player actions that are labels. It's exactly the same as the matrix. So with version 9, I can click on this and it will go and retrieve those movies for me, just like the matrix does. However, the clever thing is in your scripting you can do percentages and so on, so any statistic can be clickable to retrieve video. Now, one of the things that we run up against is being able to change a whole group of buttons at one time. And that's why we created the master names button. Otherwise, you'd have to double click in each one and change the name manually. Well, that's not very convenient. So let's take a look at how this master names buttons features work. Now, if you right click and you customize toolbar, you'll find some of these new features hidden. So if you don't have master name buttons in your toolbar already, right click, customize it, and then drag and drop it into the toolbar. By default, master name buttons is not included in the toolbar. Okay, now when I click on this, it's going to reveal a panel. And in this panel, it displays all my columns for doing the renames. Now this is a CSV file that's stored in the user's directory, and I'll cover that off in a few minutes. So here I've loaded two teams up in my CSV file, Carlton and Geelong. So currently all of these player names are Carlton's, and you can see here that we're showing the ID, what the current name of the button is, and what the new name will be. So I'm going to go to Geelong and I'm switching it. Currently it's Carlton. So this is an ID of 01 or PLR01. This is PLR02 and so on. So if I click rename, it's going to mass rename those. It then executes my scripts and comes up with a whole new matrix using these as the row names to look inside the timeline. Let's look at one of these buttons because the key to this is this ID. Now you can have unique IDs, you can have the same IDs if you want a button or two buttons to change at one time, but just make sure that they are unique if you're giving them unique renames. So here I've set up an ID schema as PLR01. I go down to the next one, PLR02. It could be anything. You can just use plain numbers if you like. I tend to like to put some description so I know that that's a player button. Now the great thing about an ID is that we can call on that button without using its name. So that means that we can rename the button. And we just use the ID in order to rename it. So I'm clicking along and you can see that I have various IDs.